Namaste everyone, Ram here, your data hacker. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you may be. And of course, before we start this video, this very important video you definitely want to watch is make sure to subscribe, click the thumbs up, helps us be able to generate more content, comments so that I can create content tailor-made to you, okay? Another thing is, we have an upcoming event on June 17th, next month, June 17th to the 20th, where I'll be teaching the ins and outs of how to live a stress and disease-free life. Nobody out there in this space, in the internet, is able to do this. I have mastered this over the last two decades. It wasn't always the case for me to, it wasn't always the case that I was like that, stress and disease-free. And I've learned how to do this, and I can teach you how to do this. One of the first steps and one of my biggest works in recent past is my book, The Art of Stress-Free Living, which you can get a link below. And I'll refer to that book when I explain the board behind me, where I'll be talking about what is the flow state and what is its relationship with stress. How can you actually gain control and mastery over stress to make it a friend and not a foe? So in that event, in that retreat coming up, I will be going into a lot more detail on how to do this and a lot of techniques that I've integrated into my life. I've become a master of how to do this throughout the week. Whether it's a work week, whether I'm working 12 hours, 15 hours, it doesn't matter. I'm always on vacation. I'm always in the flow, and we'll talk about what flow state is shortly. So check that out. If you cannot make that event, I suggest you private message me, reach me out on social media, or comment below and I can give you other options. And of course, you can always book a free coaching session. I'm here to serve, not sell. Okay. So first thing I want to mention is that you can learn how to convert stress into flow, into a flow state. Stress state into a flow state. Stress into bliss. You can be feeling powerful, passionate, energetic, no matter what you're doing, if you learn how to take the right perspective and engage your body and your nervous system in a way that empowers you rather than weakens you. So I think the first thing is to talk about what is the flow state. This state is probably best described in an example. So the example that I want to use, just a couple examples. Just imagine you're learning how to snowboard. And you go down the bunny slope, it's great soft snow, powdery snow, and it's super easy. And there's really no stress, there's no anxiety, there's no fear. Therefore, you're not yet feeling what the flow state is. But let's say I practice, I feel very well versed in snowboarding, and then I decide, hey, I'm gonna go up to the mountain and go down one of the beginner routes, but it's gonna be a lot more challenging than the bunny slope. I get up there, and all of a sudden when I get up there, I'm like, wow, holy crap, I can't do this. This is too much. I'm filled with anxiety and fear, and I end up going back down because I just feel that I can't do it. But if I decide to overcome my fear and to start going down the slope, in that moment, I can experience what the flow state is, which is often experienced in kind of high risk or dangerous situations, or situations that are of high importance, where all of a sudden I have to get into that zone, that often athletes can get into as well, where they're all of a sudden feeling it, and they just, their reaction time is super high. They don't really have to think and reason. They're just going with the moment, with the flow, and they're able to do things at a much higher level than they could at a rational kind of level, like using frontal lobe function. You can actually turn this lobe off, which is what stress does, but gain this kind of honed in focus where you're able to now have greater power and ability to navigate under a seemingly state of duress or stress. And I'll give you an example that I give in the Art of Stress-Free Living book. So as I'm going down the slopes, I may be able to tap into the flow state. I am swerving back and forth, my reaction time is high, I'm very focused, I'm in the moment, I'm feeling very supercharged, I'm feeling very blissful as I'm taking in the moment and feeling very powerful. An example that I give in the art of stress-free living is that in moment of stress, you've seen people show feats of strength and power. I think I mentioned that somewhere over here. Where did I put it? Increased strength, power, and reaction time. So what happens here is that maybe, let's say, this is a real story. A guy is working on his car underneath, and I forget what you call what's holding up the car falls, and the car falls on the person. And there's somebody nearby that's a relative of the guy that's under the car. In that moment of high stress, high danger situation, life and death, the person is able to channel stress and get really focused and develop immense power. Strength and power. They quickly go over and lift the car up, and the person is able to be pulled out. Single person lifting a car. If you ask that person to do it on a normal, in normal fashion, just, they're sitting there at the house doing nothing, all of a sudden, go over there outside and lift a car, they will not be able to do it. So what I emphasize in the chapter Friend or Foe in the art stress-free living is that stress can be your friend. But depending on your perspective, it could be your foe. Some people, you hear them say, oh, that was so stressful. Oh, I'm so stressed out. Stress takes on this negative connotation. We've given a situation in the exterior a name. Oh, it's stressful. It's difficult, it's frustrating, it's fearful, it's anxious. A lot of these negative emotions, rather than take the moment as an opportunity, as a challenge that you can overcome. Just the same way as I'm about to go down the slope and snowboard, even though I'm not an expert, I take it on as a challenge. And I may fall and I get back up. Why is it then that we don't do that? We don't dust ourselves off, get up, and keep going and persevering, taking these moments as a challenge. And when we take them as a challenge with greater passion, we're able to then tap into this flow state. So the analogy that's really great to explain that I have in my article on medium.com, the link is below. And you want to go to that article and check it out because I go into details about the neurochemistry involved and what are the neurochemicals or the hormones involved in some of these effects. How can the brain act, for example, quicker? How can you turn off the frontal lobe but still have a state of power? How can you feel bliss? How can your reaction time go up, and so on and so forth? Your motivation, your drive. All of these things that I describe in the flow state, you can have all the time, or more often than not. So the example that I use in that article is base jumping. So if you don't know what base jumping is where somebody climbs up, they go up to this really high cliff, they get off, stand at the ledge, and then they jump off with a wingsuit. A suit that, as they dive down, they catch up so much speed that then they can fly. So just imagine what happens. You're still a novice at this. You get to the ledge. Even if you're not a novice, I'm sure that everybody that does this, every time they stand at that ledge, there's some doubt, there's some anxiety, there's some inner fear. They're trying to overcome that. They're having to overcome the obstacles, but they don't let fear and anxiety dominate them. The more you do it, the more you engage in this, the more versed you become. The more I learn how to get into a flow state, the more easily I can get into it. And that's what I teach my students, how to do this, and clients in my programs and in my retreats. So you want to really consider checking out my upcoming event. If you can, private message me for some other options. So now I'm at the edge. I'm looking down. I see the edge of the cliff. It's scary as heck. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it. And all of a sudden, I don't think about it and I just jump. And as I jump and I pick up speed, I open up my arms and the wingsuit takes hold, and now I'm flying. The difference between plummeting to your death and flying is not that, there isn't that much difference in terms of risk. There's still an inherent risk as I'm flying. Something could go wrong, I could still fall, my parachute may not open. But in that moment, as I'm soaring and I feel this control, I feel carefree and joyous and powerful and focused. My reaction time is high. My drive is at its highest. I feel super motivated to continue to fly. So there's a key element here that I mentioned in the art of stress-free living that I emphasize in my events, which is the idea of control versus uncontrollable stress. So this has actually been tested. So if I take a group of animals and I expose them, I put them in a condition where they're gonna get stressed. They're gonna get, let's say, shock stress. Another group of animals where they're going to also get shocked, but they can press a lever to turn off the shock. But the amount of time, and this is a key point, that the amount of time that group 1 and group 2 spend shocked is exactly the same. So even though group 2 can turn off the shock, in essence, they will spend longer in that chamber and they will get shocked more because they're going to be able to turn the shock off. The other group is going to spend less time because they're unable to turn off the shock, and after a certain amount of time, the shock amount is going to stop and then they cease. Both groups A get stressed the same. However, one group has no ability to control the stressor. The other group does. If you look at the neurochemistry, the anatomy, the genetics, in both examples, the uncontrollable group shows a pattern of neural atrophy, shows a pattern of gene expression associated with pathology, cognitive deficit, so on and so forth. The other group does not. So control is a key. The more we learn, and this requires a number of different things that I teach in my programs, the more we learn to navigate through the world with a greater sense of control, the more we're able to live free of stress. And so controllable versus uncontrollable stress is an important aspect. In the examples that I gave earlier, snowboarding, I have a sense of control. I'm controlling the snowboard, the rate at which I'm going down. And even though it may have been scary at the beginning, the more I practice, the more I gain dominion and control, the less the stress is, even though I'm tapping into the similar chemistry and hormonal activation. Because it's controlled, I'm able to channel it. So control equals channeling, and so this is channeled. Channeled stress. And of course, uncontrollable would be unchanneled stress. So the key here is, how do you harness stress chemistry to your advantage? So once again, the element of control comes into play. The moment I'm at my job and I feel that deadline is looming and it's just eating away at me, and I feel out of control, and maybe I don't know how to do a certain process, maybe I wasn't trained well in something, and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, or I have a lot of work on my plate, the more you get organized, the more you start to build control systems into your everyday process, the better it is. The more I build mindfulness, the more I build practices of self-care into my life, the greater I can start to channel the chemistry the right way and into my advantage. I don't let stress pathways, stress build up, negative stress. I find ways to actually shift it towards the positive side, so that what I build now is greater control, greater power, greater focus. Every act, every event in our life is a moment to honor ourselves, to love ourselves. If I'm doing a job, that job is valuable. It's providing for something, for somebody, whether it's for you, for your spouse, for your children. Find honor and love in what you do. If you don't do what you're passionate about, what are you investing your time in after work? Are you investing it in video games? Are you investing it in Netflix? In wasting your time in things that are not gonna take you where you need to go? So find time to build what you want. Find time for your passion. If you're not going to want to, let's say, build a business, become an entrepreneur, or do something else build something else with your free time. But I should say that the more that you educate yourself, the more that you gain an edge. So the more that you spend time nurturing yourself, building skills, tools, knowledge that you can use in the real world, the better it will be. But of course, more important, and I emphasize this in the Art of Stress-Free Living, is that you have to find time for things that you're passionate about. Things that allow you to get into that flow state more, so that you can start to neutralize some of the negative effects of stress. So there's a difference in perspective that you can take. And a lot of times things are stressful because of the perspective we take. And so we have to really stop ourselves and analyze what we're doing and how we're thinking, our thinking process and our mindset in that moment. Am I building, and I have a video on my YouTube channel on mind versus environment rules. Am I building the environment that will further strengthen my mindset, so that my mindset isn't something that I have to constantly nurture? I've already built it into the exterior, into the very fabric of my life. I've done all the things, and I'm doing the things that actually nurture a greater state of being. Dangerous, fearful, and stressful situations are not approached with fear, anxiety, or trepidation, but instead are approached with passion and control and power. It's the same feeling as I'm about to jump off the cliff. I'm feeling anxious and fearful, but I start to gain command over it as I jump off and I fly. And in essence, you're able to fly through life on a high, in a sense, a natural high. So harness stress can lead to amazing feats. I've mentioned the example of feats of strength. So when you harness stress is when you get into this flow state. And it activates the ideal neurochemistry, as I mentioned. And it shares a lot of parallels with stress. So in the article, which I suggest you check out, I mentioned adrenaline, for example. In that example, adrenaline or epinephrine, that's one of the main stress hormones. Even though both states activate the same hormone, they don't have the same effect. And of course, that hormone turns off that frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex. So now you're not second guessing yourself, you're not holding back, you're just reactive and flowing, and creativity can now explode. Because even though the frontal lobe makes us human, is extremely important for a number of different functions, from attention, working memory, impulse control, emotional inhibition of fear. Even though it's very important, it can limit you. So if you find a way to increase your potential by letting go, but then channel it, then you go from being a diffuse light bulb that sprays light everywhere to becoming a focused laser beam that can actually now have more power and more energy and do more damage than a light bulb. I can look at a light bulb and it doesn't do anything to my eye, but a laser beam will damage my retina. It's the difference between being focused and unfocused. In the Art of Stress-Free Living, I use this as a following example. So you have in a room, let's say the room is at 90 degrees. Feels warm. In that room, there is enough heat to start a fire. But why is it that fire does not start? Because the heat is too diffuse across the entire room. But if I were to take that heat and I focus it and I concentrate it, then it becomes a lot more powerful, and in essence, it can now induce a fire. So again, I teach the steps on how to become a lot more concentrated and powerful and focused in my programs. I've already talked about strength, power, and reaction time, and I mentioned the article, the neurochemistry involved in this. And as reaction time happens, And this is something very important. I mentioned this in the working overtime chapter in the Art of Stress-Free Living, is that when you're in the flow state, when you're doing and living in a way that is full of passion, doing the things that you love more, and you're in line with your dharma, with your purpose, in line with your greater purpose. This is important, something that I teach students, that if you're unhealthy, if you're stressed out, if you're diseased, if you're struggling with life, you're not going to be able to be aligned with your dharma, with your purpose, your greater purpose. Therefore, I work to teach students how to do this, how to remove the obstacles, so that then we can work on aligning them to their purpose, and then huge dramatic things can occur. And of course, related to slowing down of time is that, just notice this, when you're doing something that you just hate, you're just bored out of your mind, how slow does time seem to go by? You're like, oh my goodness, this day can't end. But when you're doing something fun, it's like time seems to shorten. All of a sudden, an hour goes by and you're like, what, an hour went by? I thought it was like 15, 20 minutes. If you were to measure the perception of time between the person that's doing something that they don't like, they're bored out of their mind, to something that they do like, they're really engaged and passionate and in that flow moment, the bored people will overestimate time. The engaged, excited, passionate people that are doing what they love underestimate time. Their perception of time has changed. Time is plastic. And because I'm perceiving less passage of time, so is my body. I age slower. When you live in line with your dharma, with your purpose, when you live full of passion, then everything just starts to work better. And time, in essence, slows down. Creativity and bliss are enhanced by what's called anandamide. It's an endocannabinoid that we produce naturally, that things like CBD oil or THC, what's found in marijuana, is thought to act on. And this is a natural endocannabinoid that we produce. And you can learn how to enhance them. This flow state enhances them. So just like a yoga master enhances its state of bliss, they're blissful all the time, ananda, that's what bliss means, ananda in Sanskrit, you can actually do that as well. That's one of the things that motivated me to start this movement, to start this mission, which is to teach people that even though they come just like me, from a regular world, a regular Joe, with a regular life, in a Western environment, full of a lot of responsibilities, working long hours, you can actually still become a master of life, a master of health, and so on and so forth. And I want you to know that that's accessible to you. You can live 100% stress and disease free. So this ananda enhances the state. So what we want is to engage stress, but in a relaxed state, in a controlled state, because relaxation enhances creativity. When we're not overthinking, we're going with the moment, everything is just flowing, we're able to now be more creative. And I emphasize a lot in businesses that if you create the right culture, the right system, you can actually increase productivity, creativity, energy, passion, decrease sick days, so on and so forth. Of course, some neurochemicals that are activated, like serotonin, dopamine, will enhance your mood, your motivation, your drive. There's a reason why people seek out these high-risk behaviors, because these high kind of dangerous situations, skydiving, let's say for example, because in the moment when they feel like they're gaining a sense of control and freedom, it just really fills them up with this beautiful sense of joy and bliss and power that they crave and they want. And I'm here to tell you that you don't need to seek out those states of risk or danger. You can actually have it in the here and now with your own power of your own consciousness. You don't need to be seeking out these dangerous situations where you could get at risk or get hurt or even worse, die. And of course, you're also modulating what's called the endorphins that modulate pain, and so pain perception may go down. Stress effects are modulated, so stress now doesn't take on a negative connotation, it takes on a positive, more enhancing and powerful connotation. And of course, if you're anxious, if you're dominated by anxiety and fear, then you're not going to be able to get into that flow state. So by controlling fear, by controlling anxiety and learning how to do it, and I teach people how to gain control over this, how to dominate fear and anxiety, then you're able to get into this flow state much easier. And of course, the opposite also takes you away from that. So if I'm bored or lacking passion, this is high energy, this is gonna be more lower energy, I'm tuning out, I'm not wanting to be there, then there will be no flow. I'm disconnected, I'm not present in the moment, I'm not engaged with my body, with my nervous system, with the present moment. Over here, I'm not engaged as well because I'm decentralized, I'm too agitated, I'm too energized and I'm focused because of fear and anxiety ruling me. So I want you to check out the article on medium.com. Read it. It really is really an amazing article. It's well worth the read. And of course, hopefully you stuck till the end of this video, and consider checking out one of my events, working with me online, booking a coaching session, whatever is easiest for you. I'm here to serve. You can live a stress and disease-free life. I wasn't always like that, and you can do that as well. Everybody struggles through life, but you can get to the point where you can master it, and you can start giving others the version of you that they deserve, and of course that you deserve as well. Have a beautiful day. I'm Ram, the Hacker. Namaste.